Hello everyone, this is Prashanth from MIT. Today I'll be presenting our ongoing work on modeling social media narratives about caste-related news. Before we get into more details, we need to know about the caste system. The caste system in Indian subcontinent is one of the longest surviving grouping mechanisms characterized by hierarchical gradation of purity. This has led to systematic discrimination and oppression of many communities over several centuries. Broad caste and Varna names are shown in the diagram below, and how the access and ownership to resources and opportunity decrease substantially across this hierarchy is also shown by the arrow mark here. As Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the father of Indian Constitution, says, the certain communities were and or are treated as outcasts even today, and the outcast is a byproduct of the caste system. Nothing can emancipate the outcast except the destruction of the caste system itself. The Government of India has formally recognized these historically discriminated communities as scheduled castes or scheduled tribes for Dalits and Adivasis. And there are other backward classes as well, referred to as OBCs. Although social media has opened avenues for civil society, law enforcement agencies, NGOs, and people belonging to different social groups to raise awareness about casteist practices that continue to date, social media also offers space for casteist people to perpetuate their prejudices and demonstrate hostile behavior towards specific sections of the population they consider unequal. Some of these casteist tendencies may arise from privilege, ignorance, implicit bias, radicalized ideologies, or even targeted campaigns. Prior research has primarily focused on studies related to endogamy and their qualitative interviews and surveys, or hate speech detection on social media, or analysis of caste in newsrooms, to list a few. However, there is a vast gap between its prevalence in our day to day life and sufficient NLP efforts to understand and tackle casteism in social media. In our work, we construct a corpus sensor using a data processing pipeline that aggregates caste-related news stories from mainstream news sources and then maps these news stories to social media comments, which is basically Reddit, and then extracts value judgments representing different user opinions for the news story. Finally, we will apply different learning strategies to infer value judgments and effectively generate counter narratives to user generated comments. These are the threefold contribution of our current work. For our data collection process, we use two data sources, traditional mainstream data and the social media data. First, we begin with the traditional mainstream media data. For this, we refer to a media content analysis platform called Media Cloud that tracks millions of news stories published online and creates an instant analysis of how digital news media covers the topic of our interest. Notably, Media Cloud allows users to choose media sources or collections and submit Boolean queries that match these sources' stories. Here on the left, you can see how you can write Media Cloud queries using Boolean queries or logical operators. On the right, you can see a sample search query as well. Given that Media Cloud permits Boolean searches, we construct a general Boolean query containing keywords related to general mentions of castes or their categories. For example, as you already mentioned, the Varna names like Brahmin, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Sudras, or even Dalits, etc. And government recognized group names and their abbreviations like scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, SC, ST, OBCs, etc. And then we also use common references to discriminative practices and forms of oppression like caste discrimination, untouchability, manual scavenging, or honor or dishonor killing, etc. And then we also use keywords related to discourse about legal provisions and affirmative action, that is, the reservation or the quota system, or even the CSCA Act, that is prevalent legal practices in India. From traditional news media stories, we actually look up for specific English language digital news sources and create a keyword based search as already explained. In this work, we mainly focus on English language news stories and then obtain the news collections in India. So, this includes both national, state, and local level news stories as indicated in Media Cloud as well. And as you can see here in the figure, we actually show the attention over time where the percentage of caste-related news stories normalized by week data over 2 year period from January 2019 to January 2021 is what is being shown on the right. We also note that the peaks refer to important caste-related news stories that created a national level debate. For example, the initial peaks in the first few weeks of January 2019 are related to a popular constitutional amendment related to a EWS or economically weaker section quota bill for the so-called upper caste communities. Since we use keyword search based methods, news stories might not be centered around caste all the time and yet picked by this aggregation method due to the mere occurrence of the term caste. Hence, this collection could contain other stories that are not centered around caste. We clean up our data by training a simple binary classifier to identify caste-related news stories. Given that it is a pre-processing step, we annotate the stories just around 1,000 news articles to verify the caste specificity, that is, tag them being caste-centric or not. So, following prior work, we fine-tune a transformer-based model, that is BERT-based model, and utilize the representation of the CLS token to predict the label probabilities, which is basically the binary probability if it's class-rated or not. With an F1 score of 89.6, we apply this classifier on the noisy collections that we have obtained from the prior step. Here is an example of a story, and the BERT model predicts if it's caste-rated or not. Next, with respect to the social media source, we choose Reddit due to the public availability of data. To collect social media narratives around specific news stories, we use Push Shift API that searches for similar cast relevant keywords as earlier. For those news articles that were shared on Reddit, we use a Python module Pro to access Reddit API and extract user generated Reddit comments associated with each of these news stories. Here are the API endpoints that contain a subreddit or even comments related searches that we could automatically make. We chose only those Reddit posts containing references to URLs from our aggregated news stories dataset. Note that several media houses might report a single incident. However, not all of them get equal attention on Reddit. The major incident related to the news stories might get discussed with a single reference to the media story as well. And hence, this is what can be seen on the right, where we have a specific news story and the comments for that particular news story are highlighted here. Here is the data set statistics once we actually do all these processing steps. And after all these steps, we are able to obtain approximately 868,000 comments for different Reddit posts containing news stories related to caste. Towards interpreting different narratives that a news story might lend itself to, it is important to understand varied opinions that might arise, which could be either from the positions of the right or wrong that the users might express based on their beliefs and value system. This judgment of the rightness or wrongness of something or some policy or even some user or someone based on a comparison or other relativity is referred to as value judgment. A value judgment is a claim about something's moral, practical, or aesthetic worth. Some of the example sentences might look like, that's a very righteous thing to do. That's unfair thing to do like that. Or even, it is good to have intercaste marriage. All this could be actually examples of value judgment because these are normative, which means that they evaluate things concerning certain standards or norms. Humans linguistically express such value judgments in many ways. For example, we explore FrameNet to systematically identify and extract the comments containing expressions of value judgments. Particularly, we choose an abstract frame referred to as social behavior evaluation involving a particular speaker judging behavior or action against pre existing social standards or beliefs for particular social situations. Other frames inheriting this abstract frame include those that are shown in the blue on the top here, which is called frame to frame relations here. And these could be like compliance, either disgraceful situation, expertise, frugality, mental property, or morality evaluation, etc. Each of these frames contain lexical units that provide various means of expressing value judgments. We extract comments from our edit comments to get different value judgments related to the caste-related incident reported in the news story. Here in the table, we show some of the examples, which are relevant expressions extracted from the edit comments containing lexical units provided in their corresponding frames. We also provide the dataset statistics once we obtain the comments containing value judgments as well, which comes around 118,000 approximately. So let us get into the ongoing modeling work. First, we begin with embedding the comments. First, we feed the comments from Reddit containing value judgments to Universal Sentence Encoder. We apply Universal Sentence Encoder primarily because it's actually demonstrated improved for performance in semantic similarity tasks in comparison to other transformer-based models like BERT. And then we get a kind of a representation for each comment. Since we have three comments here, we get three different representations here. So, as our next step, we identify high level topics associated with caste discourse. For this purpose, we run cluster analysis using agglomerative hierarchical clustering using position weighted universal sentence encoder computed at the previous step. So, once we perform the hierarchical clustering, we get different clusters which might be associated with different topics of interest. As a next step, what we do is that we display the TC visualization of the sample stories and cluster labels tagged manually, representative of the most common words present in the stories in the cluster. We extract different expressions of value judgments from the Reddit comments, and we are able to obtain such different varieties of topics within the caste discourse itself. Now, we would like to know if these value judgments are able to show different perspectives within each of these topics itself. So what we do is that for the news stories in each cluster, we extract different expressions of value judgments from their associated Reddit comments. We aggregate, cluster, classify them as positive, neutral, or negative at the cluster topic level. We use a Vader, which is kind of a sentiment analysis tool. And so as one can see, each of the topics have different positive or the negative scores, and caste killings have an overall negative opinion as expected that people are not divided on this and take the side of the victim most of the times. And there are cases like intercaste marriage where the opinion is kind of divided between people who actually are not supportive of intercaste marriages and people who are supportive of intercaste marriages. Now, as a part of our ongoing modeling process, we investigate ways to identify or generate value judgments by taking news stories, user comments as input. So while any language model or any kind of classification methods can be used to either generate or extract these kinds of value judgments from the user comments and the news story details, in this work we use simple transformer-based model to encode the input text for this purpose. As a next step, we will experiment, or our goal is to experiment with a different controllable generation methods or even retrieval methods to obtain counter narratives. We will explore both retrieval as well as generation methods for this purpose. And then within the generation methods, we will also explore data and decoding based methods, where the decoding based methods will pre train a language model using the cultural dataset alone, while the decoding based method introduces a modification to the generation strategy without changes to the model parameters as such. So our counter narrative generation or retrieval process can actually gain from domain adaptive pre-training methods or even using plug and play language modeling methods as recently obtained by, proposed by DA3 as well. So our evaluation will utilize both automatic and manual metrics, assessing not just the quality of generations or retrieval methods, but also how to produce relevant counter narratives corresponding to particular user generated comment. So we hope to produce counter narratives for caste-related posts, and we believe that our work on modeling a discourse around casteism is one of the early efforts to tackle such critical issue and a springboard further research in this direction. Thank you so much for listening.